Well, I'm back, and those of you out there that's sharp enough probably noticed I got the same shirt on that I had in maybe what was the last video. Don't know whether I'll put the one I already had made in between these or how it's going to work out, but anyway, I shot a video earlier today that was a continuation of my thinking in the one where I had my bloody headed picture at the beginning of it. I told you I'd come back and deal with what was going on there with my head. And so here I am back, and I'm going to deal with that in this video. I got a couple other things I got to deal with first. First of all, I got some breaking news. Guys got back with me. That's why I was putting up that sign, and I heard somebody come in the door and look back there, and there was a bunch of them filing in. Turned out there was 10 of them. And not a few different ones. I think there 5 or 6 of them was in the original group of 11, and then there were 4 or 5 of them that wasn't in that group. And I think they even said Goober'd like to come back if I'd have him back. Now I'm going to have to think about that a little bit before I take another chance on him. But what the guys had been doing, they got together and they got to talking about what it was going to take to get back to work as my studio audience, and they did some investigating on their own, and I'd mentioned to them and just in passing that they needed to check into some of these things like maybe Oprah or Jimmy Fallon or Helen DeGeneres or some of these other folks that had a studio audience, and find out what was entailed in getting that studio audience in there. I said, I think them folks buy a ticket to get in there. They have to pay to come be a studio audience. They don't get paid like you guys are. I don't know, one of them knew somebody that knew how to get on the internet and find stuff out like that for them. They did a little investigating. They decided maybe I was right, and maybe they ought, and maybe they was getting out of line and wanting extra money. So they come back, and like I said, there was 10 of them. And they elected a new president. They fired the old guy they had. He wasn't going along with their new way of thinking, so they fired him, and he ain't part of them anymore. And they elected a new guy to be the head of their union. They got Dog Moon involved in it somehow. I know Dog hangs out the pool room sometimes, but didn't know he'd get involved with something like this with this crowd. But they elected Dog to be their president and be the one to talk to me. They think that's going to give them some kind of advantage because me and Dog's related. I'll get into that some other time. But Dog Moon and I are Dog's name at one time actually was Mooneyham, just like mine. And through a series of events that maybe I'll talk about someday, he changed his name from Mooneyham to Moon. But he's related to me, and the guys elected him to be their new president, and he does have a little bit more sense than most of them, so we're getting along with that. There's going to be 10 of them. I told them I couldn't afford 10 of them all at once. There could be 10 of them, and they could decide who comes to work on the day that I got work, but I can only afford to pay 4 of them, and maybe only 3 of them. And then I said, let's just start with 3 and see how it works out, and if things work out, maybe I can afford 4 of them. But they can decide who it is going to work that day. They can, but 3 of them need to come be my audience. And they wanted to know, you know, if the budget was still $55, and I said, well, I hadn't thought about the budget yet, but they wanted to know what they'd make if 3 of them showed up with the new budget. And so I did my calculations again. I told them it'd be about $8, I think, for each episode. And most of them was all right with that. One of them said, "Hey, there's 4 of us. It was 10. How to get to be 8 when it was 3?" I told them I didn't before when we had that other agreement. I didn't have expenses in my budget for my lawyer to tell me what to do about dealing with their union. So when you factor that in, the 3 knocked their share down to $8 a piece. So took the air out of them a little bit, but you know, they got along with it all right. And I think, you know, pretty soon you're going to see my guys back. So for those of you that liked Pool Room Guys and the extra that they bring to the Hard Times Guy videos, we'll get to see them again. Today, and then there's one other thing I got to mention to you. Yesterday I was talking to some of my consultants, and one of them is my oldest daughter Shannon. She loves my videos, and I just for the heck of it, I asked her which one of the videos was her favorite so far, and she said, well, she didn't have favorites, she loved them all. And I thought, well, you know, that's dodging the question. So I pressed her a little bit on it, and she said, I will tell you this, Dad. She said, I can tell you my least favorite ones. And I said, what's that? And she said, the ones with them idiots from the pool room in them, because I want videos that's got family history and things that I'm interested in them, and those pool hall guys messed all that up, and I didn't get none of that in the videos they were in. So I promised her that no matter what was going on, I'd try to give her some family history or a family story to go along with the videos. And so today, because of that, we're going to talk about this, and I don't know how well it's going to show up on the screen, but this, if you can tell what it is, or if you can't, it's a glass mailbox. Hold it up there, and then I don't know, you might be able to see it better if I took what's in it out of it. I don't know, I can't even do that. It's got the, yeah, I can. It's got a bracket here, and this bracket goes, against the wall and out like that, and then you slide this mailbox down in that, and it hangs on the wall. And then there's a lid that goes on it. Mailman takes the lid off, puts the mail in, puts the lid back on. That's the way it's supposed to work. And these are old. I think maybe the Chinese, I think these got expensive enough that the Chinese tried to ruin this market too, and I think maybe they tried to make some, but I think there were such a poor example of them that they never went over very good, because you could spot them from clear across the room, a repo versus the real deal on these mailboxes. But when I was a boy, I lived on 526 15th Street. Some of you knew that from the Foot's Tomb episode. I lived at 526 15th Street, and that house, I might show you a picture of it in this video. I don't know, I'm going to get to some videos about 526 15th Street pretty soon, but not today except for this. That house on 526 15th Street, we had a mailbox like this attached to the front of our house up on the front porch. And it was just exactly like this one except for this lid. This is a homemade lid, because the lid to this one's gone. And the lid to the one that we had wasn't gone, but it was in pretty sorry shape toward the end of the time that we lived there and had that glass mailbox. I'm going to tell you 2 stories. The first story is about my mother and about how the lid got tore up on our mailbox. My mother, when I was a boy, subscribed to 3 magazines. She subscribed to the Saturday Evening Post. She subscribed to a magazine called McCall's. And she subscribed to a magazine called True Detective, depending on which story you believe. But I'm pretty much sticking with my version of the story. Saturday Evening Post, McCall's, True Detective, all subscribed to by my mother. Now, the reason I introduced that last bit of doubt, Mother always referred to the True Detective magazines as your dad's. Those are your dad's magazines. My dad was an intelligent man. He was smart, but he wasn't educated. At least not when he was a young man. Much of the education that he received in his lifetime, he accumulated that over years. So when he was a young man, and I'm talking about the time when I was a boy on East 15th Street, he didn't read much. He read, the things that he read were the auction reports from the automobile auctions in Indianapolis and Evansville. And he could read the NAPA guide or the black book or the blue book or the yellow book, any of those kind of books that listed the different values for different models of automobiles in different stages of condition. He sat and studied those because part of what he did was buy and sell used cars, and he didn't even want to have to pull out the book. When he saw something that was a bargain, he wanted to know it so he could do something about it. And then when he had something to sell, he wanted to know what it was worth so that he could get all that it was worth when he sold it. So he read those kind of things, but he didn't read True Detective. My mom did, but she didn't want anybody to know that she did. So she kept that book in a different place than she kept the McCalls and the Saturday Evening Post, and she must have read it mostly after we went to bed, because I know my dad didn't read it, and we didn't get it for him to read. We got it for Mom to read. I know she read it because I could hear her talk to her sister, my Aunt Colleen. My Aunt Colleen must have read it too, because they would talk about different stories in True Detective. And as a boy, I noticed that they knew quite a bit about True Detective. So True Detective was my mom's closet secret. She read that magazine. I might mention while we're talking about that I love Norman Rockwell's art. And I think probably that began as a young boy from me looking at the covers of Saturday Evening Post, which Norman Rockwell did lots of them. I still just love to look at pictures that he did and read books about his development of his characters and how he did his artwork. Didn't intend to go there, but just came to me while I was saying this, thought I'd throw that in. This is a mailbox like we had on East 15th Street. And the lid on ours got tore up on mail by our mailman on magazine delivery day when all three of them magazines came at once. Our lid was on a hinge, and it hinged up like that, and it was metal. He'd put that hinge up there, and he'd stuff all three of them magazines down in there, and they wouldn't fit. And so over time, our lid got bent and twisted to where it didn't hardly function anymore. And the reason for that was my mom read McCall's and Saturday Evening Post, and somebody read True Detective. Because of us having a mailbox like this when I was a child, and these mailboxes got more and more scarce because they're made out of glass, and glass breaks. And so once they quit making mailboxes like this and started making the sheet metal kind, predominantly, and finally, and they even made some cast iron ones. But once they went to that version of Mailbox and quit making them like these mailboxes began to gradually disappear. And I decided I wanted one, just because we had one when I was a kid and they were hard to come by anymore. And when I first decided I wanted one of these and was going to have one, I was probably in my early to middle 20s. 50 some years ago, I decided I wanted a glass mailbox like this. Today, I have two of them. I have this one, and I have one that's hanging on the wall in my family room. Guess when I got them? You'd never guess. I got this one this year, and I got the one that's in the family room toward the end of last year. It was still 2019, but the girls' basketball season had started, and we were playing games away, and I found one in an antique shop in Mooresville, Indiana, at a price that met my standards, and I bought it. It took me 50 some years to buy a mailbox like this. One of these days I'm going to start, and I guess today I started already. I just started talking to you about buying and selling things. And I was going to talk to you about buying and selling things in an auction, but it doesn't matter whether it's an auction or not, because the basics of buying and selling are the same. Doesn't matter where you're buying and selling. If you're buying at an auction, the basics for doing that are the same as if you're standing at a yard sale, or you're in somebody's barn, or you're sitting talking to somebody at a ball game, or anywhere you meet somebody and you're trying to buy something. The basics are the same. And I'm going to use this little mailbox as an example of what you need to do. The first thing you need to do is you need to have a plan, a strategy. You need to know what it is you want, what all the requirements of it are to be what you want, and then you had the knowledge of what it's worth. Once you have that, and you've established a value for it and what you're willing to pay for it, then you need patience and you need discipline. You have to be willing to wait till you find what it is you want that meet this criteria of what you've established your strategy for buying it is, and you have to have the discipline to stick to that until all those things come together for you. Now, because I wanted one of these, I could have bought one a long time ago, but I didn't want to pay what I considered more than you should pay for one. I can remember when I was in my early 20s, a guy that was a friend of mine, he still is a friend of mine, he lived in a rental house, and we went there to play poker not long after he first moved in that house. We had a group of guys that met on a regular basis, played poker. I went there, and right in behind, you couldn't see it from the street, but in behind a big pine tree that stood next to the door into his house was one of these mailboxes hanging on the wall. I said, Mike, boy, I'd like to have that mailbox. He said, it's not mine, I'm just renting this place. I said, who do you rent it from? He told me. I called them up. I tried to buy their mailbox. I tried to trade them a brand new regular mailbox for it, but they didn't want to sell it. And eventually, that mailbox disappeared. I don't know what happened to it. Later on, I noticed that my wife's aunt and uncle had a mailbox like this on their front porch. I tried to buy it. That mailbox has always been there, and they gave me some lame excuse about why they couldn't sell me that mailbox, and I offered them all that it was worth at the time. They didn't want to sell it, and they eventually sold the house, and when they sold the house, before I could get over there and find out the new owners wanted to sell me the mailbox, that mailbox was gone. They replaced it with a different one. When I asked about it, they said no, that mailbox, somebody else had wanted it and they got it. So I missed that mailbox. And then, I don't know, not too many years ago, my oldest daughter, she got a mailbox like this. And I even tried to buy hers, but she wouldn't sell it to me. She liked her mailbox too, and she actually put it up on the front of her house. I hope it doesn't get broke, but it's there. She's using that mailbox, just like the mailbox I had when I was a boy. So, I told you, I eventually bought a mailbox. I bought it at a price that was a good price. I could turn around and make money on it, sell it just about anywhere to anybody. If I wanted to just make a little money on it, if I wanted to break even, I guarantee I could sell that mailbox in a day or two. But I've got one. I don't want to sell it. It's in my house. I would sell it for enough money, but I don't want to, so you probably don't want to buy it. This one here is for sale. Got one problem, it don't have the original lid, but that doesn't matter for what most people use these for anyway. This lid looks good. Looks good, really better than the original lid does. But in my mind, because it doesn't have the original lid, it's worth a little bit less than if it did. But I deal with that when I try to sell it. I'm not trying to get as much for it as I would like the one that's hanging in there in the house. So I've got one. This one's for sale. That one in there could be for sale for enough money. But it took me 50 years to buy it. I didn't lose faith though. I stuck to my plan, and I own a mailbox, and now I've got one where I can sell it. I can sell this one. After I found one, then this one just kind of fell in my lap, and I didn't hardly pay anything for this one. All those years of looking for one, and then I got two within 6 months, and this one here, I think I paid $6 or $7 for that. I mean, that's so wrong, it ain't even, I'm ashamed to tell you that. I'm ashamed to tell you I didn't make them take more money for it, because I know what they're worth. I've tried to buy them for years and years. Okay, now the hole in my head in the last video. You remember that video I did that was titled A Broken Spittoon and Cherry Sticks or something like that? It was about a blue crock spongeware spittoon that my grandfather gave my Aunt Colleen for her birthday when she was a girl. I'm not even sure she was a girl. She might have been a young woman. But he gave her that thing, and it was broken in several pieces, and she had to put it back together. And there's a video out there about that. I talk about it. In that same video, I talk about a truckload of wooden sticks that I got from a friend of mine, Nelson Brannaman. They were all solid cherry. They were about 1.25 inches, maybe 1.5 inches square in cross section, and some of them were like 20, 24 inches long. Some of them were longer than that. Well, and there was a ton of them. I did lots of things with lots of those. But it got down to where I just about wore out the market on anything I could make with cherry sticks, and I had a bunch of them in the garage in a box, and I'd just use them for kindling. When I needed kindling, I'd go out there and get me some of them cherry sticks. I finally got down to where all I had left was them longer ones, and they wouldn't quite fit in the stove. They had to be. I should have just took them to a table saw and sawed them in two, but I didn't. I had a brick laying there, and I'd put one end of them on that brick and the other end out here, and I'd stomp on them and break them, and then take them and use them for kindling. Well, I ran into one that was stubborn one day. You ran into a stubborn one every once in a while. You stomped on it, didn't break it. You had to stomp harder. And I stomped harder, and this one still didn't break. And I looked around. I seen a splitting maul over in the corner, so I went over and got that splitting maul. And I come over there, and I grabbed it about halfway up the handle, and I turned it backwards where I was hitting that stick with the back side of it, not the sharp side. And I whacked that stick to break it, and it broke. But a piece of it flew up in the air, and it hit me right between the eyes, right in the forehead. If you ever get a cut in around your head where it's thin and stuff like that, sometimes they bleed pretty good. And I'm on blood thinner anyway, so that thing, I bled that wasn't, that little hole was just barely a pinhole. Uh, you couldn't hardly see it when you wiped the blood away, but it didn't start bleeding again. But I bled like a stuck pig for, I don't know, 40 minutes. And my wife took a picture of me. And so I got that picture, and every once in a while I just use it for something, for effect, and I put it at the start of that video. It wasn't really hurt, wasn't really near the injury that it looked like it was. I just stuck it at the front of that video, and I got a lot of comments about it, and so I thought I'd tell you what it was all about. Given that, I think I wore out this little bit of a time that you've allotted me. I thank you for viewing my videos. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe. If you haven't seen all my videos, go back and watch them. And I'm a Hard Times guy. Have a nice day.